Radio Westeros, Episode 102, Hidden Identities.
Spoilers all books.
Hello there, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Radio Westeros. I'm your host, Lady Guinevere, and with me, as always, is Yolkboy.
Hi, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, which is all about the hidden identities of A Song of Ice and Fire. If you like character mysteries and theories, then you've come to the right place.
Yeah, today we'll begin by discussing the trope of hidden identities in this saga with a rundown of those hidden identities already confirmed in the text. Ever wondered how many times Arya Stark has posed as someone else? We'll be taking a close look at her and other characters related to the theme of identity.
After that, it's time to go full crackpot and walk you through several hidden identity theories of our own. We'll talk about the member of the Brotherhood without banners who might be keeping his true identity a secret.
And then we'll consider one of the most intriguing and mysterious characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, Quaithe of the Shadow. The fandom has turned itself inside out trying to solve the mystery of who Quaithe really is, and we think our solution to this puzzle will really surprise you. Stay tuned for potentially a massive revelation in Daenerys Targaryen's story.
Next, we'll consider another character that hails from Asshai, Melisandre. Well, it turns out that she has a long history before Asshai, so we'll be trying to fill in the blanks and speculate who her parents might be.
And then we'll discuss yet another mysterious character, the Ghost of Highheart. The diminutive albino woman helped change the course of history, so clearly George views her as a minor character of great importance. We have a brand new theory on who she might really be.
Finally, we'll round up the episode by discussing who else will prove to have hidden identities in the Winds of Winter and beyond. Spoiler alert, there's quite a few.
So today there'll be much speculation as we revisit some of our theories from years ago and attempt to offer our most definitive versions of them, as well as a brand new crackpot you won't have heard before, all wrapped in a deeper discussion about the role of hidden identities in George's writing. But before we move on, we want to thank all the patrons who make Radio Westeros possible, including our Flaming Lightbringer patron, TJ Harrington, our Dragonsteel patrons, Peter and Multude, and our Pale as Milk Glass patrons, Akka and the Company of the Cats, Crispy, the Song of Ice, Kelly, Schwartz the Black, Sister Winter, MT Walls, first of his name, John Wergarian, and Half-Maester Zach, as well as B-Word and Mr. J, the Bear and the Maiden Fair, and Sir Tim of House Jib Jab Hot Dog Shop, house motto, we forge the chains we wear in life.
And we also want to shout out Eric B., an OG bronze level patron who we are eternally grateful for. And if you're interested in becoming a patron and gaining access to perks like early release and exclusive content, check out our campaign at patreon.com/Radio Westeros. Maybe you can help keep Radio Westeros sailing into the future. And with all that said, now let's get started with hidden identities.
My time is done. Jaqen passed a hand down his face from forehead to chin, and where it went, he changed. His cheeks grew fuller, his eyes closer, his nose hooked. A scar appeared on his right cheek where no scar had been before, and when he shook his head, his long straight hair, half red and half white, dissolved away to reveal a cap of tight black curls. Arya's mouth hung open. "Who are you?" she whispered, too astonished to be afraid.
The concept of hidden identities in A Song of Ice and Fire is a double-edged sword. On one side, there's the potential of a reveal that surprises the reader and twists the plot in unexpected ways. However, on the other side, it's brought out the inner conspiracy theorist in many readers, leading to an endless parade of hidden identity theories that cast suspicion on characters without good cause. In a famous, albeit satirical example within the fandom, apparently missing Night's Watchman Benjen Stark is masquerading as Dario Naharis and Essos, while also moonlighting as Euron Greyjoy in his spare time. While this ridiculous example might tickle the more grounded A Song of Ice and Fire fans, there is a tangible downside to some readers not trusting that a character is themselves. Such zany theories can diminish the collective understanding of the text and cause confusion in interpreting aspects of the story that were never meant to be a mystery in the first place.
But while it's wise to be cautious when wading into crackpot territory, what we aim to prove today is that hidden identities are not just a thing in A Song of Ice and Fire, but a key device that George loves to use over and over again. There are many secret identities in the books, and so surely there are some not yet revealed. And if we want to figure them out, we're all going to have to immerse ourselves in that glorious crackpot juice. Even the most grounded of A Song of Ice and Fire analysts must be prepared to fire off some conjecture if they want to solve some of these hidden identity mysteries. As such, this episode of Radio Westeros is going to be full of unadulterated speculation as we set forth to explore the possible hidden identities of mysterious and magical characters like Quaithe, Melisandre, and the Ghost of Highheart.
With that disclaimer said, should we really be ashamed of taking our serious analysis of this text into murky, speculative waters? As we'll see, George uses hidden identities often, and in doing so, he's inviting the reader to fire away with crackpot theories. In this section, before we explore theories of our own, we're going to focus on those hidden identity mysteries that have already been revealed in canon, to get the full perspective on just how much George likes to toy with the reader by using this device.
And the first character we'll look at is Arya Stark, who is the poster child for the theme of identity in A Song of Ice and Fire. While the reader is usually fully aware of who Arya is, characters in universe are often duped as she shields her highborn identity to avoid being kidnapped or worse.
After studying Arya's chapters closely, we counted a grand total of 26 different identities that we can divide into 3 categories. First, there's the true hidden identities, where Arya is actively trying to fool the characters around her. Then there's the nicknames she's given along her journey, which might not be full identities per se, but feed pertinently into her theme of shifting identity. And finally, there's a few self-concept identities where Arya views herself internally as someone other than herself.
Yeah, right off the bat, George lays the groundwork for an Arya Stark identity story. We learn in her very first chapter that her sister Sansa's best friend Jane Poole mockingly refers to her as Arya Horseface and likes to give her best horse impressions whenever Arya's around. As we said, a nickname isn't a true hidden identity, but it's a hint at the thematic road of Arya's journey. And in her very next chapter, we learn that there's another nickname circulating Winterfell, Arya Underfoot, given to her by one of her father's guards because she's always, well, underfoot.
While these names lay the foundations to the notion of different selves, it's not until the end of the first book and beginning of the second that Arya's identity journey really gains pace. The catalyst is the downfall of her father Ned and the rise to power of the scheming Lannisters. This sets Arya off on a journey to find safety, a journey where she'll need to pretend to be anyone but her highborn, much coveted self. The key question is if this young girl will be able to withstand the constant onslaught against her true identity and what effect the endless deceit will have on her sense of self.
Yeah, after witnessing the public execution of her father, Arya is desperately protected by the roaming Night's Watch recruiter Yoren. He immediately orders her to take up a male identity and escape King's Landing, and so Arya becomes a boy. In A Clash of Kings, we learn that Yoren has christened her Ari, an orphan boy. This is her first identity ruse, and Yoren whisks her away from the city to ostensibly join the quest to recruit new men in black. Yoren's plan is to traverse the Riverlands and deliver Ari back to her home in Winterfell.
But the plan goes quickly awry. After a civil war breaks out between the Starks and Lannisters, the countryside of Westeros becomes a dangerous place. Arya ends up at the cursed castle of Harrenhal, desperate to conceal who she really is. After being forcibly stripped and scrubbed by two old women working at Harrenhal, she can't continue acting as a boy, so she gives the name Weasel. Weasel was the name given to an infant she'd met on the road, so Arya was giving whatever name came into her head at the time.
Later in the Harrenhal chapters, Weasel finds herself serving drinks to Roose Bolton. She once again gropes for a new name and comes up with Nymeria, or Nan for short. Nymeria, of course, is the name of her long-lost direwolf, and Nan seems like a nod to her elderly nurse at Winterfell, Old Nan. Fortunately for her, Roose, who's gearing up to betray the Starks and would have been delighted to discover a missing Stark girl right under his nose, doesn't see through her deceit.
In A Storm of Swords, Arya and her friends have escaped Harrenhal and run into the resistance fighters who call themselves the Brotherhood Without Banners. Singer Tomo Seven Strings jokingly calls Gendry, who is secretly Robert Baratheon's bastard son, and Arya Mutton and Squab, respectively. And when it's time for another identity switcheroo, Arya embraces Squab, which is in fact a small pigeon.
And the next time she needs to switch names is on the journey to Braavos, as she uses a special iron coin to travel to the headquarters of the Faceless Men Assassins in the Venetian-inspired city-state. Aboard the ship, the Titan's Daughter, she becomes salty after boarding at Salt Pans.
But George isn't done with Arya's identities yet. In fact, he's going to ramp things up from here on. The faceless men ply their trade by pretending they're people they're not, often magically donning faces of dead people as part of the trick. These assassins are so deep into the hidden identity theme, readers have no idea who they are or who they might have been previously. A quick change of face and they're someone else. The one faceless man we know fairly well is Jaqen H'ghar, who becomes the mysterious alchemist, and then Pate at the Citadel. The faceless men require their acolytes to sacrifice their true selves in order to become, quote, no one.
First, Arya is sent for training with a fishmonger called Brusco. Arya chooses the false name Cat, remembering her mother was called Catelyn before her brutal murder at the Red Wedding. Cat of the Canals practices the Braavosi language, selling seafood with Brusco and his daughters while observing the locals closely.
But Cat of the Canals doesn't last long. After tapping into a Stark identity and killing Night's Watchman Darion for his crime of deserting the Watch, the faceless men see fit to punish Arya. Her mentor, the kindly man, temporarily takes her eyesight away and she becomes a beggar girl called Blind Beth. As Beth adjusts to being blind, she sharpens up her other senses in lieu of her eyesight. She's becoming more skilled as a future assassin.
And so satisfied about her progress are the faceless men that they restore Arya's sight and send her off on her first true mission. They grant her the face of an ugly little girl and task her with assassinating a dodgy insurance broker. Trying not to draw attention to herself, Arya succeeds by passing a gold coin that poisons the broker when he bites into it to check its authenticity.
Finally, after that success, the kindly man sends Arya to Izimbaro, which is not a place but a person, a man in charge of a troop of players. Arya takes on the identity of Mercedine, shortened to Mercy, as we see in the Winds of Winter sample chapter. The fact that she's become a mummer adds yet another layer onto the theme of false identity.
So there's the long list of parts that Arya has played in her quest to keep her true identity secret. But that's not all. Add to the pile all the nicknames and self concepts. For nicknames, we have, as we mentioned, Horseface and Underfoot. Then her frenemy, Lamy Greenhands, names her Lumpyhead in Clash of Kings, with another companion, Hot Pie, varying that to Lumpy Face. Scary, noseless Night's Watch captive Rorge calls her Stick Boy and Rabbit Killer, before good old Lamy dubs her Worm Breath for eating worms. Greenbeard of the Brotherhood Without Banners calls her Squirrel, and the strange prophetic ghost of Highheart calls her Wolf Child, Blood Child, and Dark Heart.
And finally, as for self-concept, she thinks of herself as a sheep, then a mouse when she's afraid on the road, and then the ghost of Harrenhal when she begins to cause chaos among the Lannister men at the Blackened Castle. In dance, she calls herself the Night Wolf after her warg dreams when she's inhabiting Nymeria during her sleep at night.
So there's the more or less full account of Arya's identities. And what's interesting is that even with the faceless men's training, she never truly gives up her true self, in spite of what she tells them. Her refusal to throw away her skinny sword Needle, which to her symbolizes her family and true self as a Stark, conveys to readers that no matter how many times she becomes someone else, her soul will always be Arya.
So just from a quick study of Arya's story, we can see just how much of a major theme identity is in these books. But there are many other characters who find themselves masquerading as other people, including some whose true identity is obscured from the reader for a time. To start with, we should mention Arya Stark, not the real Arya, but the fake one. The Jane Poole who had once teased Arya as being a horseface ends up forced into pretending to be Arya as Ramsay Snow attempts to consolidate the North for House Bolton after House Stark and Winterfell were devastated.
And fake Arya's best friend, the real Arya's sister, Sansa Stark, pretends to be Elaine Stone in the Vale after fleeing the Lannisters in King's Landing. Political schemer Peter Baelish, who had a long-term crush on Sansa's mother, disguises Sansa as his own bastard daughter to throw the scent off her and later to make a move for control of the Vale. The reader looks forward to Sansa revealing her true Stark identity in story, and it's really so sad that both Stark sisters can't just be themselves.
And speaking of the Starks, there's one character in their household who is almost as knee-deep in the theme of identity as the Stark sisters. Ned's ward, Theon Greyjoy, took an opportunistic tilt at taking Winterfell, only to be captured by Ramsay Snow and tortured into submission. Now missing a few digits, and perhaps his manhood as well, Theon answers to the name Reek, though he wasn't the first Reek. The first Reek was Ramsay's original smelly friend and mentor, killed by Sir Roderick Cassell. After being captured, Ramsay assumed his identity for a time, so there are 2 secret identity reveals in this plotline alone.
And by the time Theon becomes Reek, he's already been fooled by the secret identity of a family member. In A Clash of Kings, he travels back to see his family on the Iron Islands. He meets a woman who calls herself Esgred, and as he rides on horseback with her, he flirts and talks arrogantly. To his discomfort, Esgred turns out to be his very own sister, Asha. In the Iron Islands, Theon is a fool from the beginning, a dynamic rooted in the fact that his identity was severely challenged because as a boy he was a Greyjoy, growing up as a Stark. George has stated that Theon let his feeling of unbelonging poison him.
And when Theon makes his decisive move to betray the Starks, take Winterfell, and impress his father, Bran and Rickon Stark find themselves in great danger. When they and their companions run away from Theon, he ends up killing 2 local miller's boys and pretending that they were Bran and Rickon. Once again, George hoped to fool the reader with an identity switcheroo, but on the longer timeline, it's much of the North that is hoodwinked.
And speaking of the North, Bran Stark is embroiled in another hidden identity mystery. After falling into a coma early in the first book, Bran is psychically visited by a mysterious creature called the Three-Eyed Crow. This visit inspires Bran to head up to the far north, past the wall, hoping to unlock his ability as a green seer. Once Bran arrives at an ancient cave, he meets the Three-Eyed Crow in person. By context clues, the reader learns that he is none other than Brynden Rivers, also known as Bloodraven, the former Hand of the King, whom we've seen on page in the Mystery Knight novella. Brynden became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch before going missing beyond the wall, which we'll be talking about later. Turns out he ended up tangled up in the roots of a weirwood tree, living an unnaturally long life as a green seer with the Children of the Forest. And did we mention that in the Mystery Knight, Bloodraven assumed a secret identity as Sir Maynard Plum? And of course, in that same book, the character called the Fiddler is revealed to be Daemon Blackfyre II. And most importantly, let's not forget that the whole Dunk and Egg series is built upon Egg's secret identity as Prince Aegon Targaryen.
But it's not just in Westeros that we find hidden identities. Over in Essos, there's Tyrion Lannister posing first as Hugor Hill and then Yollo. Then there's the case of his travel companions, Griff and his son, young Griff. They turn out to be former Hand of the King, Jon Connington, and Prince Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Elia. To be fair, there is some doubt if Aegon's identity is really true after all, so there could be a hidden identity under his hidden identity. Got it?
And then we have Quentyn Martell and his companions who need to keep their highborn identities secret as they traverse the troubled waters of Essos to Slaver's Bay to meet Daenerys Targaryen. Quentyn starts out playing the role of a merchant, but then feels uncomfortable, so he has his friend Cletus Ironwood play the merchant, and Quentyn himself becomes the servant. But when Quentyn joins the Windblown Sellsword Company in order to get to Meereen, he takes on the name Frog, given to him by the other sellswords for the way he hops to attention. Frog is now playing the role of squire to Archibald Ironwood, who's going by Green Guts for his persistent seasickness. Couldn't be clearer.
When Quentyn and co arrive in Meereen, they spend time with Barristan Selmy. The old knight had previously masqueraded as Arstan Whitebeard when he was considering joining Dany's entourage, but wanted to observe her first. And that's not to mention Barristan's long history of being a mystery knight at tourneys, not once but twice in his youth.
And so there is a laundry list of hidden identities already confirmed to the reader. We readers would be silly not to consider that there might be many more reveals in the last 2 installments of the series. George has filled this saga to the brim with mysteries, and so it's clear from what we've said today that he loves hidden identities. The only question is, which characters should we be considering, and who might they really be? Stay tuned to hear our ideas.
Altogether, hidden identities are designed to cause excitement and surprise among readers. George is not afraid to repeat the device unapologetically. But that doesn't mean half the cast in the story are someone other than who they're meant to be. Considering the long list we've put forward today, there's something that all of them have in common. All of the hidden identities serve a narrative function beyond the element of surprise. Arya's fluid identity leads to a fascinating arc where she will ultimately be able to change herself at will. Theon's self has been deconstructed as both a pound of flesh for his crimes against the Stark and as a study of what makes a person who they really are when everything's taken away.
Yeah, and the ruses of Sansa, Quentyn, Tyrion, Jon Connington, Aegon, Bran, Rickon, Bloodraven, Barristan, Asha, Ramsay, and Jane Poole all have an obvious narrative purpose. So we believe this is what separates a good identity theory from a bad one. Not only must the theory make sense in George's world, but there has to be a purpose behind it. In this way, the author can repeat the device over and again without it feeling cheap. If we as readers are going to answer the call to make speculative identity theories, we need to make sure that they fit the plot in this way. It's our best chance of avoiding another Benjen is Dario is Euron.
And with all that said, up next we'll be offering our own theories, working diligently to make sure they fit the narrative framework. So let's start with a member of the Brotherhood Without Banners with an uncertain origin. It's time to consider, who is Lem Lemoncloak really?
I cannot eat a silver stag, nor ride one. A skin of wine for my dreams, and for my news, a kiss from the great oaf in the yellow cloak. The little woman cackled. Aye, a sloppy kiss, a bit of tongue. It's been too long, too long. His mouth will taste of lemons, and mine of bones.
Have you ever read the chapters centered around the Brotherhood Without Banners rebel group and wondered about the background of their high-ranking, yellow-cloaked member, Lem Lemoncloak? It was a similar curiosity that led Lady Gwyn, circa 2013, to begin theorizing about Lem's true identity. With no true name and a murky past, she wondered if there was more to his story than met the eye. She came up with a theory that captured the imagination of the online fandom and had the users of the A Song of Ice and Fire forums intrigued. To this day, it remains one of the most beloved hidden identity theories within the fandom. And here's a bit of Radio Westeros lore. This was one of the pieces of Lady Gwyn's work that tempted me to work with her in the first place.
Yeah, through my extensive and, dare I say, obsessive involvement in discussion of the RLJ theory on the forums, there was one detail in the complex backstory of Robert's Rebellion that really stuck out to me. In Mira Reed's tale to Bran Stark about the tourney of Harrenhal, she mentions a character called the Knight of Skulls and Kisses, who's also known as Richard Lonmouth. While there are few mentions of this character in the books, the pertinent detail here is that he was Rhaegar Targaryen's squire. As such, this is a minor character who could be very important to the greater plot. The thing is, nobody knows what happened to Richard Lonmouth during or after Robert's Rebellion.
And so Lady Gwyn began to wonder if Lonmouth might have disappeared for a time after the rebellion and re-emerged sometime later as someone else. Inspired by conversations with fellow posters at Westeros.org, she eventually suggested that that someone could be Lem Lemoncloak. In this theory, we'll explore this potential hidden identity, walk through the key evidence, and explain why it could end up being very important to the plot. So let's zoom in to the pages of A Storm of Swords, where the majority of the evidence lies.
And before we go on, I want to hat tip a forum user known as Sir Leftwich for his initial small question about the fate of Richard Lonmouth. Leftwich, if you're listening, thanks again for providing the spark that first lit this blaze of speculation. Now, remembering that George likes to lay out his mysteries logically, we find it interesting that the evidence for this theory is mainly contained within a single book. Lonmouth is first mentioned in Daenerys I of Storm of Swords, and we meet Lem with his notable yellow cloak 5 chapters later in Arya 2. In Arya 4, Lem is linked to kisses when the Brotherhood are hanging out with the diminutive and mysterious prophetic albino known as the Ghost of Highheart. 2 chapters after that, we get Mira's tale of the tourney at Harrenhal in Bran 2, including that reference to the Knight of Skulls and Kisses. So, if Lem is Richard Lonmouth, it strikes us that this would certainly be a logical way to weave in the clues.
So let's examine our claim that Lem is linked to kisses. The Brotherhood Without Banners, desperate for an edge in their quest for resistance and revenge on the Lannister rule, turn to the Ghost of Highheart for tidbits of prophecy and magical insight as to what's happening within the various factions in Westeros. But the ghost doesn't demand gold for payment. No, strangely, very strangely in fact, she demands kisses, specifically from Lem Lemoncloak. She says, "A skin of wine for my dreams, and for my news a kiss from the great oaf in the yellow cloak. His mouth will taste of lemons, and mine of bones.
So not only does the ghost ask for Lem's kisses, but she says her mouth will taste of bones. This bizarre quote makes little sense unless we view it through the lens of Lem equals Lonmouth. Lonmouth was the Knight of Skulls and Kisses, after all, so bones and kisses seem heavily related. In fact, George has released semi-canon information that House Lonmouth's sigil depicts red lips strewn on yellow, yellow skulls strewn on black. Notice the prominent use of yellow there, the same color as Lem's memorable cloak.
So with these possible connections between Lem and Lonmouth in mind, let's delve deeper into who the two men are to see if there's further hints they could be one and the same. First of all, consider that Arya judges that Lem has the look of a soldier. He's noted to be a big man, and we might take these details as clues that his time with the BWB is not his first taste of war. Also note that he wasn't one of Lord Beric's original crew, but joined the resistance in the Riverlands later.
But if Lem is Sir Richard, why would a former squire of Rhaegar Targaryens be putting his life on the line for a group originally formed to support King Robert Baratheon? Robert killed Rhaegar at the Trident, after all, and that moment basically signified the end of the Targaryen dynasty. Surely Richard Lonmouth would hate Robert to the core, given he was Rhaegar's squire and noted companion.
Well, the plot thickens when we examine Mira Reed's story of the tourney at Harrenhal, in which she says that the Stormlord drank down the Knight of Skulls and Kisses in a wine cup war. So with George's description of the Lonmouth arms in mind, it seems like Robert and Lonmouth were drinking buddies, which makes sense with the knowledge that House Lonmouth are a Stormlands house, where Robert reigned as Lord Paramount before his rebellion. The two, no doubt, knew each other well.
And so there's circumstantial evidence that Richard Lonmouth was very conflicted during the rebellion. He might well have been a close friend to both Rhaegar and Robert. Notably, George has told us that the Lonmouth house words are, "The choice is yours." Do those words hint at the dynamic of Lonmouth having painfully divided loyalties when Robert went to war with the Targaryens? There's no clear indication in the text to confirm what side Lonmouth fought for, that of his friend and mentor Rhaegar Targaryen, or that of his drinking buddy and overlord Robert Baratheon.
However, information in the World Book suggests that Lonmouth was part of a party of men who supported Rhaegar over his father, the Mad King Aerys II, and might have hoped for the regime change that would have seen Rhaegar ascend as king of Westeros. Maester Yandel tells us Prince Rhaegar's support came from the younger men at court, including Lord John Connington, Sir Miles Mouton of Maidenpool, and Sir Richard Lonmouth.
And interestingly, Lonmouth was one of the men who left the tourney at Harrenhal in search of the mysterious knight known as the Knight of the Laughing Tree, whose surprise appearance in the lists upset the paranoid king enough that he demanded they be unmasked. Robert and Rhaegar also rode off in search of the Mystery Knight, so it's interesting to consider who Lonmouth went with. Though we're in speculation territory here, we firmly believe Rhaegar found and unmasked Lyanna Stark. This begs the question of how much Lonmouth would have known about Rhaegar and Lyanna's early relationship, given that the Crown Prince shocked the lords and ladies in attendance at the tourney by declaring Lyanna the Queen of Love and Beauty after being inspired to win the victor's laurels.
Rhaegar choosing Lyanna over his own wife here is a key moment in the groundwork for the rebellion, known infamously as the moment the Smiles died. And Rhaegar publicly presenting Lyanna with a crown of blue winter roses forms part of the symbolic evidence that Jon Snow is their child, remembering Dany's vision in the House of the Undying of a blue rose growing at the wall. So what did Richard Lonmouth know, and what was his role in this complex equation? We feel certain that if Lonmouth is still alive, he's in possession of intriguing knowledge that could shed some light on the major character mystery of this saga.
And in support of this idea, there's evidence that Lonmouth was one of Rhaegar's companions when the prince returned to the Riverlands and apparently kidnapped Lyanna. In the World Book, Yandel says, with the coming of the new year, the crown prince had taken to the road with half a dozen of his closest friends and confidants on a journey that would ultimately lead him back to the Riverlands. Not 10 leagues from Harrenhal, Rhaegar fell upon Lyanna Stark of Winterfell and carried her off, lighting a fire that would consume his house and kin and all those he loved, and half the realm besides.
With Barristan Selmy's information that Rhaegar knighted Lonmouth and that the former squire remained his close companion, we can surmise that the half-dozen companions were most likely Arthur Dayne and Oswell Went, as previously revealed in the World of Ice and Fire app, Mouton and Lonmouth, both identified as close companions of the prince on more than one occasion, and possibly Connington and Prince Lewin Martell, whom the World of Ice and Fire indicates were also strong supporters of Rhaegar.
So, if Lonmouth was riding with Rhaegar that fateful day, we might take that as a hint that he sided with the Targaryens in the rebellion. However, he might have viewed the rebellion as a war against Aerys rather than Rhaegar, so equally he might have chosen Robert. Whatever the case, Lonmouth's heart would have been in conflict with itself. Making the choice would have been very painful for him, and if he's alive to this day, he might still be wrestling with the decision he made all those years ago. His house words would be steeped in meaning, with him having had to make the choice of a lifetime.
And this is where Lonmouth's possible re-emergence into the story gets interesting. It would explain why he would have disappeared into the Riverlands and lived a lowly life before re-emerging as Lem Lemoncloak and fighting against the Lannisters. It's Septon Meribald who tells us that soldiers can break at any time. Every man has his limit, and it's just possible Sir Richard reached it in the aftermath of the Trident. Two references imply this could be what happened to Lem. Bugger that, said Lem Lemoncloak. He's our god too, and you owe us for your bloody lives. And what's false about him? Might be your smith can mend a broken sword, but can he heal a broken man?
Not long after Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie were taken in by the Brotherhood without banners in a storm of swords, the company arrived at the Inn of the Kneeling Man. Here the young people were given ale by the innkeeper's wife because she has no milk or clean water to offer. Here's a passage. The river water tastes of war with all the dead men drifting downstream. If I served you a cup of soup full of dead flies, would you drink it? Ari would, said Hot Pie. I mean, Squab. So would Lem, offered Angai with a sly smile.
So why would Angai say such a thing? Could it be that Lem once drifted in the river with the dead? Well, much later, in A Feast for Crows, the elder brother on the Quiet Isle tells Brienne his story of being left for dead in the river after a battle and washing up downriver, alive and reborn to a new life. Could something similar have happened to Lem?
And following the suggestion that Angai's sly comment there may indicate that Lem went into the river with the dead at one time, let's suppose that Richard Lonmouth did go into the river after the Battle of the Trident, as the elder brother did. If he was fished out and nursed back to health by some kind soul, it may have been some time before he was able to get news of what had happened in the battle and afterwards. Perhaps he was devastated that his friend the prince had been killed by his other friend and liege lord. Would the guilt of his choice have weighed heavily on him? If we add to the possibility that he was at Stony Sept, where Robert personally killed Miles Mouton, a one-time close companion to both Lonmouth and Prince Rhaegar, it seems that might be enough to cause a break.
So we believe there's great reason to wonder if Sir Richard Lonmouth is Lem Lemoncloak. But as we said in the last section, we need to contemplate if there's a strong enough narrative purpose for George to be using a hidden identity trope here. So we return to the tourney of Harrenhal and the Knight of Skulls and Kisses vow to unmask the Knight of the Laughing Tree, whom most of us assume to be Lyanna Stark. We know that George uses thematic parallels frequently in his narrative. We also know that Arya Stark bears a resemblance to her aunt, as Ned tells her in the Game of Thrones. Lyanna might have carried a sword if my Lord Father had allowed it. You remind me of her sometimes. You even look like her.
Looking at some of the interactions between Arya and Lem, one incident in particular stands out. When Arya learns that she is, in truth, a prisoner of the Brotherhood Without Banners, she attempts to flee. It says, when she glanced back over her shoulder, 4 of them were coming after her, Angai and Harwin and Greenbeard racing side by side with Lem farther back, his big yellow cloak flapping behind him as he rode.
It's easy enough to imagine a similar scene with Lyanna pursued over similar ground at Harrenhal by a group including Sir Richard Lonmouth. Later, almost as a sly nod to Arya's similarities with her aunt, Tom sings to her. And how she smiled and how she laughed, the maiden of the tree. She spun away and said to him, no feather bed for me. I'll wear a gown of golden leaves and dye my hair with grass, but you can be my forest love and me your forest lass.
And of course, the significance there is the name Maiden of the Tree. So we arrive at the narrative purpose of this theory. Not only is it interesting to consider what Lonmouth might have seen and been privy to as Rhaegar's companion, but consider his value to the author if George could bring him back into the story to tell the reader all he knew. By revealing Lem Lemoncloak to be the broken man Richard Lonmouth, the author could deliver vital pieces of the R+L=J jigsaw puzzle that he might otherwise struggle to convey realistically.
Yeah, we believe the RLJ reveal is so complex and central to the saga that any reveal will come in pieces from various sources. It's true that Bran Stark green-seeing the past from the cave north of the wall might give us the best possible window to show and not tell the marriage between Rhaegar and Lyanna, as well as snippets from the Tower of Joy. But would George really want to use Bran as a plot device to reveal every facet of this mystery? We really doubt it.
And so a Lem Lonmouth reveal could deliver key information to the reader in a wholly unexpected way. Through him, George could confirm that Lyanna was the Knight of the Laughing Tree, that Rhaegar unmasked her, and what happened when he did. Lonmouth could inform us why Rhaegar decided to name her Queen of Love and Beauty, and what was really going on behind the scenes when he did, and ultimately the whole truth about Rhaegar's supposed kidnapping of Lyanna Stark, which we've theorized might have been a rescue from the Mad King, who might have still been wroth at the Mystery Knight and wanted to burn them alive.
For the record, it doesn't seem like if we get the next book, we'll have to wait too long to put this theory to the test. The last we saw of the Riverlands in A Dance with Dragons, one person who likely knew Richard Lonmouth was on a collision course with Lem Lemoncloak, and is a strong candidate for a reveal. When Jaime Lannister resurfaces, he might find himself in for a surprise reunion with someone from his past. We await the winds of winter to see what the yellow cloak-wearing, soldier-looking, bones and kisses related Lem Lemoncloak has to say for himself.
And this comment from Thoros of Myr in A Feast for Crows may be a final hint that there's more to some of his companions than meets the eye. You are not the only one with wounds, Lady Brienne. Some of my brothers were good men when this began. So, that's our first Radio Westeros exclusive hidden identity theory. If you like that one, stay tuned for 3 more. Let's start with a character steeped in mystery from her first appearance in A Clash of Kings. Who is behind the red mask and going by the name of Quaithe? And now it's time to thank our patrons from the Valyrian Steel level. Thanks so much to Aileen, Arshia, Oxheart, Amber the Adamant, Blithe Spirit, Archmaester Kobe of the Higher Mysteries, Cabot the Unfrozen, Dean, Dolorous Fred, Lord Sosa and his faithful canine companion Theoden, Jill, JM, Kevin, Herbert Westeros, the Miskatonic Maester, Lady Silverwing, Mark, the Sithorian, W, Sword of the Evening, and Lady Darliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron, as well as our Dragonglass patrons Ange, Liza, Fairy Glen, Lady Faith, Maiden of the Tree, Lynn, and Leonardo Corleone. She dreamed. All her cares fell away from her, and all her pains as well, and she seemed to float upward into the sky. She was flying once again, spinning, laughing, dancing as the stars wheeled around her and whispered secrets in her ear. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Quaithe? Dany called. Where are you, Quaithe? Then she saw. Her mask is made of starlight. Remember who you are, Daenerys, the stars whispered in a woman's voice. The dragons know. Do you?
One of the most mysterious characters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire is Quaithe, a recurring minor character Daenerys Targaryen first meets in A Clash of Kings. Altogether, we see Quaithe in 6 different chapters, yet the reader is left greatly puzzled by who she is and what she wants. While her role in the story might appear small given the briefness of her appearances, the fact that she revisits Dany with snippets of puzzles and prophecy might suggest that there's a whole layer of mystery about Dany's arc that could lead to major revelations later in the saga.
So let's start at the beginning and refresh ourselves with what we know about Quaithe. We first meet her in Vaes Taloro when 3 representatives of the affluent port city Qarth arrive in the desert ghost town to see Dany's dragons and potentially offer her respite in their city. The 3 representatives are Pyat Pri, the chief sorcerer of the city, Zarozan Doxos, a rich merchant prince, and Quaithe herself. Notice that the first 2 turn out to be very important to Dany's story going forward, so perhaps we can infer that Quaithe is important too.
Immediately, Dany notes that Quaithe wears a strange red-lacquered wooden mask, and by the end of the 5th book, we still haven't seen her real face. In story, the mask ostensibly denotes her as a shadowbinder, yet, on a meta level, could this be a convenient conceit to hide Quaithe's true identity? We think it's likely, and that George wants us to wonder who is behind the red mask.
There follows an interesting scene where the trio introduce themselves. Pyat Pri speaks in Dothraki, then Zaro speaks for himself in Valyrian. Finally, Quaithe speaks in, quote, the common tongue of the 7 kingdoms, saying, I am Quaithe of the Shadow. We come seeking dragons. The fact that she replies in the language of Westeros with no noted accent could be a giant hint that Quaithe was originally Westerosi herself.
Looking at what else can be gleaned from the scene, which ends with Dany's response that the trio have found dragons, note that Quaithe says she's from the Shadow. This is the land adjacent to Asshai, which is the mystical part of the map famed for its mystery and dark magic. Though Asshai is a large city, we learn from the World Book that it's mainly empty, so the community of magicians living there might well be small and close-knit. Keep in mind that 3 other characters in the story have spent time in Asshai. Melisandre, Stannis' flame-reading, shadow-birthing sorceress. Mirri Maz Duur, who was part of the blood magic ritual which hatched Dany's dragons. And Archmaester Marwyn, known as the Mage, an unconventional maester with an interest in magic and prophecy, who we see using a glass candle later in the story. Quite a cast of characters, and we're left to wonder which of these characters came to know each other in Asshai.
With another detail from the World Book, that there are no children in Asshai, it seems clear that those characters wishing to explore dark magic and ancient prophecy travel to this semi-lawless city on the fringes of the map to practice their arts and perhaps learn together. Think of it as a university for the dark arts. The fact that Quaithe has been there and is confirmed to be a shadowbinder later in the text adds yet more intrigue to her character.
So early in Clash, we do know a few things about Quaithe, but immediately have more questions than answers, a theme which continues through the books, no doubt much to George's amusement. Before we move on to her other appearances in the books, it might be a good idea to consider something we learn much later about the Shadowbinder first. In Dance, it seems to be confirmed that Quaithe is prophetic when she predicts the future, telling Dany that the Pale Mare will arrive at Meereen, which it does in the form of a quickly spreading disease some months later. With this in mind, we might wonder if Quaithe foresaw the birth of the dragons and was actually waiting in Qarth for Dany to arrive. In other words, Dany meeting Quaithe was likely not some random occurrence.
In Qarth, Quaithe gives Dany a warning. Beware, she tells her, and goes on to explain how vulnerable Dany is in the city with her invaluable baby dragons. Dany notes that while Pyat and Zaro had showered her with promises from the moment they saw the dragons, obviously eager for something in return, Quaithe had only given cryptic phrases. Though Dany wonders if Quaithe is treacherous, note that she's not asking for anything, nor acting obsequious. She is actually trying to offer Dany advice for her safety, albeit in her strange and cryptic manner. Also, note that Jorah Mormont also sees Quaithe here, quashing the half-baked theory that she's purely a figment of Dany's imagination.
In Dany's third chapter in Clash, she finds herself in a crowd in the city centre, watching magicians climb a ladder of fire. When Dany calls it a fine trick, Quaithe steps out of the crowd and disagrees with her. No trick, Quaithe says, and George brings it to our attention once again that she's speaking in the common tongue. Quaithe explains that since the birth of Dany's dragons, fire magic has increased, an observation which works in parallel with the fact that wildfire production is increasing in Westeros.
As Dany is absorbing this information, Quaithe gives another warning that Dany should leave Qarth soon before she's not permitted to leave at all. With the hindsight of what happens later in this book, Quaithe is giving Dany sound advice again here, without asking for anything in return. When Dany asks where she should go, remembering that Qarth is geographically isolated, Quaithe gives her one of the more famous riddles in the series. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow.
While, as you know, we love to wade in on theories and puzzles, today deciphering Quaithe's riddles is beyond the scope of our discussion. But we will say that when Dany interprets the shadow to be a shy, Quaithe says that there is truth there. Perhaps Quaithe has learned truths and foretellings of Dany and her dragons in the City of Dark Arts. Dany is left befuddled by Quaithe's unusual manner and, like the reader, wonders who is behind that red mask. At the start of the next book, it says, was she an enemy too, or only a dangerous friend? Dany could not say.
In A Storm of Swords, Quaithe appears in one chapter. Moored on board her ship outside of Astapor, Dany has a dream and wakes suddenly. She sees Quaithe, yet very vaguely in the dead of night, like a shadow. Quaithe tells Dany that her handmaids remain asleep, then repeats her famous riddle, which we mentioned earlier. Jiqui awakes, and Dany tells her that she just had a dream. In her sleepy state, it actually seems that Dany's unsure whether it was a dream or not.
Given that Quaithe had no real way of sneaking into Dany's room on board the ship, the reader might be tempted to join Dany in writing this off as a dream. However, later in the story, at the Citadel, we see that Maester Marwyn, another alumni of Ashai, has lit a glass candle. Of these magic obsidian devices, Marwyn says, The sorcerers of the freehold could see across mountains, seas, and deserts with one of these glass candles. They could enter a man's dreams and give him visions, and speak to one another half a world apart, seated before their candles.
So, whether the scene was a dream or just Quaithe somehow appearing before Dany as a vision, both possibilities can be explained by the theory that Quaithe has possession of and is operating a glass candle in the manner Marwyn has described. Note that Marwyn says that this is specifically Valyrian magic.
In A Dance with Dragons, we get two scenes with Quaithe. The first is similar to the one we've just discussed, where Dany wonders if she's asleep. Quaithe appears by the persimmon tree in Dany's pyramid garden to assure her that she is not dreaming now, nor was she on the ship. When Dany wonders how Quaithe navigates her guards, Quaithe explained that she's not really there. She gives another riddle, which goes, "The glass candles are burning, soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others, Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed Seneschal."
And there we have Quaithe mentioning that the glass candles are burning, perhaps indirectly confirming how she's communicating with Dany. And some of the characters she's alluding to do end up arriving in Meereen, namely the Kraken, Victarion Greyjoy, the Dark Flame, the Red Priest Makoro, the Lion, Tyrion Lannister, and the Sun's Son, Quentyn Martell. While others, namely the Griffin, Jon Connington, and the Mummer's Dragon, Aegon Targaryen, do not. So we're left to wonder if Quaithe has been watching this cast of characters all along via a glass candle. Notably, all of these characters were more or less moving in Dany's direction at the time of this interaction. Additionally, the mention of the Pale Mare, as we mentioned earlier, speaks to a prophetic ability in Quaithe, given that that is still months away from happening.
The brief scene ends with Quaithe encouraging Dany to remember who you are. This is another warning to Dany, but the cryptic nature of the message confuses both the Mother of Dragons and the reader. Quaithe claims to want to show Dany the way, but Dany still doesn't know if she can trust her. The Shadowbinder is so mysterious that the reader is still scratching their heads 5 books in. But there's one more Quaithe scene in A Dance in Dany's final chapter, so let's look at that.
The final appearance from Quaithe comes in Dany 10, which is the last published chapter we have, aside from the dance epilogue. Lost in the Dothraki Sea, delirious and starving, Daenerys hears Quaithe's voice in another dreamlike state. The woman repeats the "to go north" riddle, which might be pertinent as the line "to go forward you must go back" might be about to come to fruition if Dany returns to Vaes Dothrak, the Dothraki city she spent time in during the first book.
When Dany hears the voice, she looks around for Quaithe and sees her in the night sky, thinking her mask is made of starlight. It seemed like a fair assertion that this is another glass candle visitation and that Quaithe is set on following her and guiding her. Once more she says, "Remember who you are," before adding, "The dragons know, do you?" And those are the final words we get from Quaithe.
To us, it's very interesting that Quaithe visits Dany at her lowest ebbs or periods of heightened danger, highlighting that despite her brief appearances in the story, she's a very important character that we as readers should not forget. Altogether, we think you'll agree that there's something very, very curious going on with Quaithe, which is why so many fans have boggled their brains trying to figure out who she is or what she wants.
The problem with figuring out the Quaithe mystery, we think, is that George has yet to deliver the key clues to solve it. Perhaps all matters Quaithe will be revealed in the final book, A Dream of Spring, and so he might be queuing up a selection of clues to be delivered in the Winds of Winter. So that leaves the reader a bit lost. The mystery has been largely set up. We don't have the clues we need to make a good stab at the answer.
So, how do we solve this mystery without clues? Usually, the first prerequisite for a decent A Song of Ice and Fire theory is evidence. But as we're saying, the evidence hasn't been released yet. Whatever the solution to this mystery is, will sound like a total crackpot idea without evidence. So perhaps we should expect an answer that is unexpected. George is 2 steps ahead of us, so we need to think outside the box and employ some lateral thinking.
Our approach to trying to figure out Quaithe is to put ourselves in the shoes of the author. Given Quaithe's reappearances through the saga, we think it's likely that there's a major reveal coming late in the story. Think of it like this. Perhaps the two most major characters in this story are Jon Snow and Daenerys. In the final book, it's extremely likely that Jon's story is going to contain mind-blowing reveals about his true heritage, not as a lowly bastard, but as a Targaryen king. Though this theory is already widely accepted now, it's designed to blow our minds as a major twist.
So, what if George is planning a big twist for Dany as well? We believe that Quaithe's existence points to a whole hidden layer to Dany's story. The idea that the woman behind the red mask is just a random shadowbinder doesn't really cut it. We expect Quaithe to be someone major, someone mind blowing, someone who has significant reason to be tracking Dany and the characters who will intersect with her with a glass candle and trying to guide her. Surely it makes storytelling sense that this mystery character relates to Dany in a major way.
The usual fandom guesses make little sense to us. Some fans wonder if she could be Ashara Dane, but what does Ashara have to do with Dany? And why would she be hiding her identity and acting all mysterious? Why would Ashara have faked her death, travelled to the end of the earth in a shy, and become a prophetic shadowbinder?
The other oft-touted opinion is Shara Seastar, a great bastard who would be over 130 years old. Though this one makes some sense given Shara was a noted magician and is associated with magically extended lifespans, again, it feels like, with no clear motive, we're just matching mysterious women together. Notably, Shira had mismatched eyes, which were her defining characteristic, and so Dany not noticing them behind the mask could feel a bit cheaty from a mystery perspective. We think Shira is long dead, and Bloodraven's assertion that he loved his half-sister in the past tense might seal that, given his green-seeing abilities.
And so we're left to wonder who in the story Quaithe could possibly be. With a dearth of clues, we have to consider the payoff. Which character of all the women in the story would be the most mind-blowing in a reveal? Through this lens, we arrive at none other than Rhaella Targaryen. There could be no greater twist in the Quaithe reveal than Dany being visited and guided by her own mother.
But, we hear you thinking, Rhaella Targaryen is dead. She's dead, triple dead. She's so dead that no one else in the fandom is even thinking about her as a candidate. But let's suspend our disbelief for a while and explore this idea. What do we really know about Rhaella Targaryen, and what would it take to get her to Asshai to study prophecy before reuniting with Dany years later? How could this outrageous idea be possible?
Our first observation about Rhaella Targaryen is that, despite being queen in the prelude to the main story, we know so little about her. Compare her to her brother husband, King Aerys. A search for Aerys through the main series yields 176 results, and that's not including all of those entries where the author calls him the Mad King. A similar search for Rhaella yields just 5 results, plus a handful of times Dany or Viserys refer to their mother generically. Given Dany is a central POV with many chapters, we find the lack of Rhaella in those chapters suspicious, like George is waiting for the later books to give us the lowdown on her.
Some of what we know about Rhaella relates to prophecy. In A Dance with Dragons, Barristan Selmy tells Dany that her grandfather Jaehaerys forced Rhaella to marry Aerys because of an end of days chosen one prophecy that the Targaryens took very seriously. At the court of King Jaehaerys II, the ghost of Highheart, who we'll be talking about later and who's known for her accurate foretellings, predicted the prince that was promised would be born of the Aerys Rhaella line. Note that in the World Book, Maester Yandel doesn't seem to know this detail, so it might have been a tightly guarded secret amongst the ruling Targaryens.
So Rhaella went through her life believing she could be the mother of a prophesied figure who could one day save the world. That must have been a great burden that weighed heavily upon her, and we'd say there is a massive likelihood that Rhaella was interested in prophecy and the predicted apocalypse. And keep in mind that as a Targaryen with blood of the dragon, she might have also experienced prophetic dragon dreams that gave her glimpses of the future.
She gave birth to her first child at Summerhall. Rhaegar was born at the family's summer palace on the very day Aegon V's quest to hatch dragons turned it into an inferno, devastating House Targaryen. That disaster seems to have been steeped in prophecy, so clearly prophecy played a huge role throughout her adult life. She no doubt wondered if Rhaegar was the prince that was promised, especially when he himself came to believe it and trained as a warrior.
That brings us to Robert's rebellion. By then, she'd had 8 miscarriages and stillbirths, followed by the birth of Prince Viserys. When her husband assaulted her on the day he burned his former hand, Lord Chelstead, she became pregnant once more. When Rhaegar fell on the Trident, unaware of her pregnancy, Aerys shipped her off to Dragonstone with Viserys for safety. Since it seems highly possible that Rhaella didn't know about Lyanna's pregnancy, after Rhaegar, Aegon and Rhaenys' deaths, she might have wondered if the prince that was promised could be either Viserys or her unborn child.
Around 9 months after arriving at Dragonstone, Rhaella was about to give birth to Daenerys. Aerys had been slaughtered by Jaime Lannister, leaving just her, Viserys, and the unborn child, as far as she knew, as the sole remaining Targaryens. This is not only devastating for her house, but potentially for the whole world if there was no prince that was promised. At the same time, the new king, her cousin Robert Baratheon, was desperate to see the remaining Targaryens destroyed. Her life was in danger, and that of her son and her unborn child, too. She might have believed that if all 3 were to fall, the world would fall with them.
Then came a huge storm at Dragonstone, which wrecked the Targaryen ships. Ostensibly, Rhaella died giving birth to Daenerys, and then, as Stannis Baratheon approached with the royal fleet, loyalist Sir Willem Darry smuggled the 2 children away to Braavos, where we have theorized they lived in a house in the secluded grounds of the Sea Lord's palace. After Darry died years later, followed by the Sea Lord himself, Viserys and Dany were turfed out and forced to live a life of poverty on the run, always wary of a potential assassination by Robert Baratheon.
But what our Quaithe's Rhaella theory challenges is whether Rhaella really died on that stormy night on Dragonstone. So let's consider the possibility that Rhaella faked her own death. First up, there's the issue of motive. We've covered the fact that Rhaella's life was in grave danger the moment Aerys died. She had good reason to want to pretend to die and escape Robert's grasp.
What we find really interesting about this scenario is that she would have also had the motive to travel to Asshai. As we said, her life was inextricably linked to an apocalyptic prophecy. Perhaps she believed with the recent demise of her husband, son, and grandchildren that one of the 2 remaining children must be the chosen one that could save the world. Maybe she wanted to study prophecy and magic in Asshai in order to get a better grasp of the prophecies and find out how she could help that happen. All the Targaryen prophetic knowledge gleaned from scrolls and stories handed down for generations was in Westeros, and that's a place she couldn't go. Since all that knowledge would be considered lost, perhaps it makes sense that she travelled to Ashai to learn more and facilitate her role as the mother of the chosen one.
But if Rhaella really did want to travel to Ashai, why wouldn't she bring her two children with her? Surely that would have been preferable to sending them off with Sir Willem Darry. Well, perhaps a tiny detail we noticed in the World Book that we mentioned earlier answers this problem. Maester Yandel informs us, after outlining all the dark magic which seems to permeate the mysterious city, that, quote, there are no children in Ashai. Clearly, for some magical reason, Ashai is not safe for children, explaining why Rhaella would visit alone. She might have told Darry to shelter at the Sea Lord's palace and await her return, while she studied in Ashai.
So, with clear motives established, the missing piece in this scenario is how Rhaella would have faked her death. To pull off this maneuver, she would require the compliance of a maester. That maester could have delivered Dany, told those on Dragonstone that Rhaella had died in the process, and then pretended to burn her body in the Targaryen tradition. Keep in mind that with the massive storm raging on the island, there might have been enough chaos to pull this off without arousing too much suspicion. But it all depends on if Rhaella had a maester that would cover for her in this manner.
So, what do we know about the Maester on Dragonstone at this time? Well, after the Targaryen dynasty fell, Robert's brother Stannis was given the Gloomy Island as his seat. We learn from his story that his maester on Dragonstone, Maester Cresson, came to the island with him from Storm's End. So, who was the maester that delivered Dany? Someone from the Citadel had to have been present on Dragonstone.
And we don't have any definitive answers there due to one simple fact. There's ostensibly no one in the story who is privy to what was going on Dragonstone after Aerys died, which is curious because George has said that by the end of this saga we'll know everything there is to know about Robert's rebellion. So there has to be someone in the story who was there to give an eyewitness account.
There would have been no better witness to these events than the Maester of Dragonstone, considering that Dragonstone was traditionally the seat of the Targaryen crown prince, in this case the recently deceased Rhaegar, and that pregnant Rhaella was so important to the house both as a queen about to give birth to another heir and the potential mother of the prince that was promised. It seems highly likely to us that this maester wasn't just any old maester, but someone highly placed at the Citadel. Better yet, especially given Rhaegar's well-known interests, a maester renowned for his expertise in magic and prophecy might have been called for. And so we suggest that this mystery maester was none other than Marwyn the Mage, Archmaester of the Citadel.
Marwyn being the one who delivered Dany makes so much sense to us. By the end of Dance, he's dashed off from Old Town, heading towards Slaver's Bay to offer his services to Dany. He could fill Dany and the reader in on so many of the blanks about Robert's rebellion if he was the Maester of Dragonstone. And he could tell Dany all about her mother, who, as we've said, has been mentioned seldom thus far. There's a lot of storytelling potential for Marwyn as the Maester on Dragonstone, and with both him and the Targaryens being so interested in prophecy, it seems to us more than plausible.
If our Marwyn theory is correct here, then the notion that Rhaella is masquerading as Quaithe gets really interesting. We learn as early as a Game of Thrones that Marwyn spent time studying in Ashai, and later that he's been piecing together bits of lost prophecy in his Book of Lost Books. Could it be that he and Rhaella set off from Dragonstone and traveled to Ashai together? Did he help fake her death to throw Robert off her tracks and assist her quest for knowledge regarding the prince that was promised prophecies? For us, this is an intriguing possibility.
So if Quaithe being Rhaella is in the realms of possibility, does it match up with anything we've learned about Quaithe in the text? Like we've said, we're still awaiting the major clues about Quaithe's identity, but there are some subtle hints that might fit. First of all, there's the fact that while Piat Pri and Zaro greeted Dany in foreign languages, Quaithe used the common tongue without a noted accent.
Then there's the fact that Quaithe seems to be trying to guide Dany, albeit cryptically. She even says to Dany twice, "Remember who you are." All of this makes a lot of sense if she's Dany's mother and has been studying ancient prophecy for years and has come back to help steer her daughter into a strong position before an end of days showdown with the others.
There's also the magic Quaithe uses. Given her foretelling of the Pale Mare, it seems she has some aptitude for and keen interest in prophecy. This would fit with Rhaella being a Targaryen who had most of her life being greatly concerned with Chosen One prophecy and might even experience prophetic dragon dreams. Also, there's the likelihood that she's skilled with a glass candle, which are noted to be Valyrian magic.
With all that said, there's the issue of motive. None of the other candidates for Quaithe offer a clear motive, but with Rhaella you get a motive that's not only clear, but could be part of a mind-blowing twist that would add a whole new layer to Dany's story. This theory might lack hard evidence, but it offers storytelling opportunities in spades, and George trying to disguise this possibility might explain why we've heard so little about Rhaella, even in Dany's House of the Undying visions, where she saw her father Aerys, her brother Viserys, her son Rhaego, and her brother Rhaegar, who are all dead. Rhaella, her own mother, is notably absent and barely gets a mention through the whole series. Maybe, just maybe, it's because she's already there on our pages in the person of Quaithe.
We first presented this idea back in 2015 in our Prophecies episode as a long-shot crackpot that we'd come up with, but the truth is that behind the scenes, we've been strangely confident in it all this time. We look forward to the Winds of Winter to see if Marwyn tells Dany he's the Maester who delivered her on Dragonstone. If so, then this theory might turn out to not be as crackpot as you might think.
And leaving that one there for now, next up we have another character who's noted to have studied in a Shy. Let's take a look now at Stannis' mysterious, witchy advisor, Melisandre. Slender she was, graceful, taller than most knights, with full breasts and narrow waist and a heart-shaped face. Men's eyes that once found her did not quickly look away, not even a maester's eyes. Many called her beautiful.
So, in that last segment, we talked about Quaithe, a one-time denizen of a Shy whose whole existence screams mystery. Now we're going to consider the identity of another character who has also spent time in a Shy, Stannis Baratheon's magical advisor, the Red Witch, Melisandre.
So, sometime before the events of A Game of Thrones, Melisandre traveled, presumably from Shy, to Dragonstone, the gloomy island that Stannis begrudgingly calls home. It's a depressing place, and in the Clash of Kings prologue, we see how Melisandre's vibrant colors contrast with the gloom and brighten up the dark castle. It's easy to see how this island community has fallen under her sway, with Stannis' wife Selyse being particularly mesmerized.
Yet George puts a lot of effort into describing Melisandre as being a character who immediately catches the eye. When she's first introduced, we get this long description. As ever, she wore red head to heel, a long loose gown of flowing silk as bright as fire, with daggered sleeves and deep slashes in the bodice that showed glimpses of a darker blood-red fabric beneath. Around her throat was a red gold choker, tighter than any maester's chain, ornamented with a single great ruby. Her hair was not the orange or strawberry colour of common red-haired men, but a deep burnished copper that shone in the light of the torches. Even her eyes were red, but her skin was smooth and white, unblemished, pale as cream. Slender she was, graceful, taller than most knights, with full breasts and narrow waist and a heart-shaped face. Men's eyes that once found her did not quickly look away, not even a maester's eyes. Many called her beautiful.
The point of Melisandre's character is that she's not only a sorceress, but a religious zealot, preaching the word of her lore in an uncompromising fashion. She's essentially a cult leader whose black and white thinking leads her into positions of extremism such as burning her enemies alive. Through Selyse, she's gained Stannis' ear, and the two make a strange pair given Stannis' aspirations as a just ruler. The general idea here is that Stannis' own black and white thinking is slowly being corrupted by his sorceress advisor, the devil on his shoulder, to Davos Seaworth's angel.
But in assessing Melisandre, we shouldn't ignore that for all her flaws, she is a big picture player concerned with the impending Others' invasion. She seems obsessed with saving the world and preventing a scenario where Westeros is enslaved by ice demons, enthralling the dead into a giant army of zombie servants. Though we can critique her methods and highlight her many mistakes, at her heart, Melisandre is a character trying to do great good. We all know by now that George likes to write morally grey characters, and this is where Melisandre's greyness lies. Is it right to perpetrate evil acts if you're acting for the greater good? This is her central character question.
As for her origins and potential hidden identity, we see that there's huge potential for a major secret surrounding Melisandre. Sharp-eyed readers have picked up on the fact that she uses glamours, which are magical spells sometimes related to gemstones that change the appearance of things or people. Going back to that description we laid out earlier, it's notable that Melisandre keeps a large ruby around her neck in a golden choker. We never see her take it off, and once we realize gemstones can denote glamours, there's good reason to suspect that Melisandre might not be all she seems. Could the red ruby be glamoring her true self?
Well, in Dance, we get Melisandre's one and only POV chapter, though it does seem likely she'll have more in Winds. In that chapter, we learn a lot about her, and the notion that she's got a hidden identity thickens. Though she goes by the locative byname Melisandre of Asshai, indicating that she considers Asshai to be a home or formative location, she thinks back to a time long before Asshai. It seems likely that she traveled to Asshai from wherever she was in order to study dark magic and prophecy. She knows about Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, has a red priest's skill at reading the future in flames, and we witness her give birth to a bizarre shadow assassin, denoting that, like Quaithe, she's a shadowbinder.
But perhaps not all of her skills were learned in Asshai. Through her memories, we learn that she was a slave child known as Melanie, who was once part of Lot 7, presumably an auction lot. She then probably spent time in a red temple of R'hllor, given it says, "There was no one, even in her order, who had her skill at seeing the secrets half revealed and half concealed within the sacred flames." In A Dance with Dragons, we meet another prophetic character named Makoro, who is enslaved to a red temple and seems to have a lot in common with Melisandre.
But for all the juicy information we're privy to in the Sol Melisandre POV chapter, we're left with more questions than answers. With the ruby around her neck likely denoting a glamour, together with the assertion that she had lived a life long before Asshai, it seems like a fair conclusion that Melisandre is a lot older than she appears, which is noted to be older than Ygritte and younger than Selyse, so we're thinking in her 20s. And if Melisandre was once Melanie of Lot 7, who was Melanie really, and what's her story? George has begun drip-feeding us clues about her true origins, and we think there are definitely more layers to this onion.
And so all this led Yolkboy, circa 2013, to investigate Melisandre's hidden identity and post his findings on the Westeros.org forum boards, as well as on the A Song of Ice and Fire subreddit. Incidentally, this was around the time when I was developing the Lem Lemoncloak Richard Lonmouth theory, so our early interactions really concerned these two respective theories. What Yolkboy suggested after his research was that Melanie might have been the child of Brynden Bloodraven Rivers and his half-sister Shara Seastar. This theory, known as S plus B equals M, gained a lot of popularity at the time. But then in 2016, Karis Van Houten, who played Melisandre in the TV show, told reporters her character was 400 years old, while the showrunners asserted that George had told them Mel was centuries old, both of which seemed to splash cold water on the idea. Today we'll explain why we take this detail with a pinch of salt in book canon and why we still believe that Melisandre could be Bloodraven's daughter.
To start, let's take a look at the evidence for the S plus B equals M theory. The first aspect of Melisandre we'll look at is her appearance and how it relates to Shiera and Bloodraven. Collecting together the aforementioned initial description of Melisandre, along with the other mentions in the books, we have a lot of details about what she looks like. Fortunately for this theory, we also know a lot about Shiera's appearance, despite her being mentioned just once in the main series. Curiously, George sent a very detailed description of Shiera to a fandom artist in 2006.
And comparing those details with what we know about Melisandre is very interesting indeed. Both women are described as very beautiful, slender with slim waists and full breasts. These details are written almost like for like in their respective descriptions. But it's another feature that really catches the eye. Both women are said to boast a heart-shaped face. This is a very rare feature in the books. In fact, throughout the main saga, there's only Melisandre and Jane Westerling that are said to have this heart-shaped face. So we find it very curious, along with the other evidence we're going to lay out, that Shara Seastar also had a heart-shaped face.
Altogether, there are resounding similarities between Melisandre and Shiera's appearance when you compare their descriptions side by side. But what about their differences? While Shiera has blue and green mismatched eyes, Melisandre has red eyes. Melisandre's skin is very pale, while no mention is made of Shiera's. And Mel's hair seems unnaturally red, which is a detail Shiera lacks.
But this theory gets really interesting when you compare Melisandre to Bloodraven. He's an albino, a rare trait used to describe just him and the ghost of Highheart. But those red eyes and white skin actually match Melisandre. In fact, Mel's skin is smooth and white, pale as cream. A Bloodraven has milk-white skin. Cream and milk. Very similar indeed.
That just leaves Mel's unnaturally red hair, but she's a follower of R'hllor, the red god. Melisandre has made herself as red as possible as part of her cult leader routine. So what if she's dyed her hair to match her eyes and her garb? What if underneath the dye she's really an albino like Bloodraven, her red eyes and white skin the big giveaways? That would mean every detail we know of her description matches either Shiera or Bloodraven, with a heart-shaped face and albinism being extremely rare traits. So if you blend together Shiera and Bloodraven, add a little red dye, you would get Melisandre.
So let's dig a little deeper to see what else we can find that matches Melisandre to the two great bastards who might be her parents. Now we've seen that there's a great case for matching appearances. Let's focus on aptitudes. Mel's main skill is in magic. Well, Bloodraven was also a great magician too. In fact, we have two great descriptions of them which fit this notion very well. In the Dunk and Egg novellas, the first time Bloodraven is mentioned, he's called, quote, the King's Sorcerer. And in A Storm of Swords, Gren calls Melisandre the King's Sorceress. And let's not forget, in the Mystery Knight, Bloodraven wears a gemstone to glamour as Maynard Plum. So Melisandre using her ruby as a glamour might be another parallel. So there's a very strong link between Bloodraven's aptitudes and occupation to those of Melisandre.
Comparing Melisandre to Shiera on this front brings yet another match. In George's description of Shiera Seastar, he notes that she was rumored to practice the dark arts, so she was a sorceress like Melisandre. What's more, George tells us that Shiera's mother, Serene of Lys, who travelled to Westeros and seduced King Aegon IV, was also noted to practice dark arts. It says, some said she was much older than the king and preserved her beauty by the practice of dark arts. Well, this is exactly what we proposed Melisandre is doing. With Serene as a grandmother and Shiera as a mother, that would explain perfectly where Melisandre got her magical aptitude from. It's not just the suggestion of inherited skill, but a shared theme which potentially binds all three women together.
And so we say that there are heaps of similarities that might suggest Melisandre is Bloodraven and Shera's daughter. And on this subject, look at what else George has disclosed in the note to the fandom artist that was supposed to be a physical description. He says, Shera's most ardent admirer was her half-brother, Bloodraven, who proposed marriage to her 100 times. Shera gave him her bed, but never her hand.
So knowing not only that Bloodraven was in love with Shiera, but that they also shared a bed really gives this theory some weight. If they shared a bed, is it such a stretch that they conceived a child together? Surely not. We just need to find a character in the story that resembles them in some way, and as we've seen, Melisandre fits that bracket to a T.
So we suggest that Bloodraven made Shera pregnant, and the child was named Melanie to fit with Bloodraven's mother's name, Melissa, and incidentally, the Mel prefix does seem to be a Blackwood tradition. Perhaps when Bloodraven was sent to the Wall for ordering the execution of the Blackfyre pretender Aenys Blackfyre, Shera tried to return to Lys, where her mother came from. We've seen how dangerous the waters around the Stepstones are, so it's not a huge stretch to suggest that she was captured by slavers and she and her daughter were sold off. Melanie might have ended up in Auction Lot 7 and eventually found herself as a slave in a Red Temple.
After studying magic for many years in her order, she might have travelled to Ashai to learn more about the ancient end of days prophecy related to Azor Ahai Reborn. By then, she was a fairly old woman and may have wanted to appear younger, to be seductive, just like a grandmother was rumoured to have done. So she reinvented herself as Melisandre of Ashai and used her prominent ruby to glamour her appearance. Given that she would have been beautiful as a young woman, we suggest she is simply glamoured as her younger self. It's Melisandre herself who tells us that the strongest glamours are associated with bones and things that remember, so it seems logical to us that appearing as one's younger self would give the strongest of glamours.
And with the evidence laid out, it's time to consider the narrative purpose of this hidden identity. We think that George really wants to bridge that gap between Dunk and Egg and the main series. We have Maester Aemon and Walder Frey, who will appear in both timelines, albeit perhaps briefly. However, one character he really wants to bridge that gap with is Bloodraven. Brynden Rivers is a major player in the third Dunk and Egg novella and surely has a huge role in those yet to be written. In the main series, he has a major influence over the plot as a Greenseer and mentor to young Bran Stark. So he's a very important part of both timelines, helping to merge the two stories.
Bloodraven having a daughter who was conceived in the Dunk and Egg timeline but appears as a major character in the main series would be a great way to build on this sense of continuity. If Melisandre is Bloodraven's daughter, and we get a big reveal in one of the later Dunk and Eggs or in the Secret Cave, it would make the whole story tighter rather than having Dunk and Egg as a disparate set of stories. We have yet to meet Shiera on page, but we imagine as a prominent great bastard like Bloodraven, Bittersteel, and Daemon Blackfyre, who all have a major impact on Westeros, Shiera might have an important legacy of her own.
And that legacy could be Melisandre, and Shera's story could be a major part of the Dunk and Egg arc, with the possibility of Bloodraven also sharing details to Bran in the cave north of the Wall in the main timeline. He's already talked about his siblings in Dance. He says, I have my own ghost, Bran, a brother that I love, a brother that I hated, a woman I desired. Through the trees I see them still, but no word of mine has ever reached them.
And with Melisandre now being stationed at the wall with Bloodraven to the north, there's the intriguing possibility that father and daughter could interact at some point. In Dance, during Melisandre's POV chapter, she looks into her flames to look for Stannis and sees Bloodraven by accident. The passage goes like this. A face took shape within the hearth. Stannis, she thought for just a moment. But no, these were not his features. A wooden face, corpse white. Was this the enemy? 1,000 red eyes floated in the rising flames. He sees me. Beside him, a boy with a wolf's face threw back his head and howled.
So it's very interesting that Melisandre is having visions of Bloodraven. Keep in mind that as part of the Weirwood network, he's inextricably linked to the old gods. Melisandre, on the other hand, is obsessed with the fire god, R'hllor. She wants to attack other religions and plans to burn the Weirwood tree at Winterfell. There are some delicious dynamics going on here if it turns out Bloodraven and Melisandre are father and daughter. Perhaps one day the pair will not be in opposition, but working together against the common enemy of ice demons, known as the Others. The Bloodraven plus Shera equals Melisandre theory offers new levels of storytelling and thematic intrigue that would really enhance the plot.
Altogether, we believe that this theory not only boasts solid evidence, but also has a strong narrative purpose. That's why we're long-time believers. And for those who are still hung up on the comments about Melisandre's age made by the Game of Thrones showrunners, we suggest that there's probably room for interpretation in George's statement about it. Remember, he's known to be fairly foggy on exact timelines. It's quite possible he said she was old, maybe implying a couple of centuries, and they ran with it, drilling down the details to suit the story they were telling. Remember, this conversation likely took place even before Dance was published. As for Carissa's claim that the number is 400 years old, well, perhaps she's right as far as TV show canon is concerned. After all, they also made Bloodraven over 1,000 years old in Game of Thrones, when readers know that in book canon, he's much younger than that. It's yet another instance where TV canon and book canon should be separated, we think, in spite of what the show team might claim. For us, Melisandre is an old woman glamoring as a younger self, and maybe, just maybe, she's the daughter of Bloodraven and Shera Seastar.
And next up, we'll be considering the last of our 4 hidden identity theories, and this one has a large overlap with what we've just discussed. It's time for our look at the ghost of Highheart.
I espied the small pale shape creeping behind the horses, thin white hair flying wild as she leaned upon a gnarled cane. The woman could not have been more than 3 feet tall. The firelight made her eyes gleam as red as the eyes of Jon's wolf. He was a ghost too. Arya stole closer and knelt to watch.
When Arya Stark is traveling through the Riverlands with the Brotherhood without banners, we meet a character whose mystique rivals the likes of Quaithe and Melisandre. So let's consider the so-called Ghost of Highheart to see if there are any layers to her mystery not yet revealed by the author.
The Ghost of Highheart is perhaps stranger looking than any other character in the saga. When Arya first sees her, it says, quote, Tom, Lem, and Greenbeard were talking to a tiny little woman, a foot shorter than Arya and older than Old Nan, all stooped and wrinkled and leaning on a gnarled black cane. Her white hair was so long it came almost to the ground. When the wind gusted, it blew about her head in a fine cloud. Her flesh was whiter, the colour of milk, and it seemed to Arya that her eyes were red, though it was hard to tell from the bushes.
This scene takes place at Highheart, a place related to the old gods and sacred to the children of the forest, the elder race of diminutive old gods worshippers who were driven to the far north after the waves of First Men and Andal invaders pushed their species to the brink of extinction. Of Highheart, we learn in the World Book, In this same era, one Andal, remembered in legend as Eric the Kinslayer, came across the great hill of High Heart. There, while under the protection of the kings of the first men, the children of the forest had tended to the mighty carved weirwoods that crowned it, 31 according to Archmaester Laurent in his manuscript Old Places of the Trident. When Eric's warriors sought to cut down the trees, the first men are said to have fought beside the children, but the might of the Andals was too great. Though the children and first men made a valiant effort to defend their holy grove, all were slain. The tale-tellers now claim that the ghosts of the children still haunt the hill by night. To this day, rivermen shun the place.
So the ghost of High Heart seems to be drifting around this area sacred to the children of the forest, suggesting a link between her and the elder race. What's more is that the initial narrative purpose of this character is to deliver prophecies apparently sent by the old gods. She tells the BWB right before conveying a list of prophecies that the old gods stir and will not let me sleep. Apparently, these glimpses of the future, largely consisting of symbolism that relates to certain characters, come to her in dreams, a clear hint that the ghost is a green dreamer and boasts blood of the children of the forest.
And the plot thickens later in the series and in the World Book when we learn that Jenny of Oldstones brought a woods witch to court in the time of King Jaehaerys II. This woods witch impressed the royal Targaryens so much that Jaehaerys wedded Prince Aerys, the future Aerys II, to his sister Rhaella after something the witch told him, altering the course of Westeros' history forever. Though Maester Gandalf seems ignorant of the details here, Sir Barristan Selmy, who is Kingsguard to Aerys, tells Daenerys Targaryen that the union of Aerys and Rhaella, her parents, was sealed due to the Woods Witch's prophecy, meaning Dany essentially owes her very existence to this prophetic Woods Witch.
Yeah, apparently the mysterious Woods Witch informed Jaehaerys that the promised prince would be born of the Aerys-Rhaella line. The Targaryen family had taken prophecies very seriously since their forebear Daenys the Dreamer foretold the doom of Valyria, inspiring the Targaryens to leave the peninsula with their dragons before the cataclysm destroyed Valyria and most of its denizens. Given that the prince that was promised prophecies concern a figure who would save the world, it's perhaps not a surprise that Jaehaerys acted on the witch's information.
But who was this Woods Witch who's seldom mentioned, but who had a massive impact on Westeros and the main story? Well, in the World Book, we're told Jenny of Oldstones was accompanied to court by a dwarfish albino woman who was reputed to be a Woods Witch in the Riverlands. Lady Jenny herself claimed, in her ignorance, that she was a child of the forest.
So it's very interesting that the Woods Witch is described as an albino who may or may not have been related to the children of the forest. As we said in the Melisandre segment, there are few albinos in the story. Among human characters, there's Brynden Bloodraven Rivers and perhaps Melisandre. Yet when we look closely at the descriptions of the Ghost of High Heart, we notice that she has the two giveaway features of an albino, very white skin and red eyes. Given she's also diminutive in size, prophetic, and is a confirmed green dreamer receiving prophetic information from the old gods, the Ghost of High Heart is a perfect match for the mysterious Woods Witch Jenny took to court.
And so it seems extremely likely that this character, who some readers might have dismissed as a quirky come-and-go character who is in the story to deliver a few riddles, is actually one of the most influential figures in the saga. In fact, there's speculation among fans that her full role is yet to be disclosed by the author. Redditor Cantus has wondered if Rhaegar Targaryen and the Ghost were acquainted, with her informing him about the prince that was promised prophecy, perhaps in return for a song on his harp.
Yeah, and those two would have good reasons to bond. Rhaegar was born when the inferno at Summerhall decimated the Targaryen family and left a permanent shadow over his story. We learn that the Ghost of High Heart was at Summerhall, no doubt with her friend Jenny of Oldstones, with some believing the former died there. it seems that the truth is that the ghost escaped and that Jenny either died in the inferno or gave up her life afterwards because of the subsequent grief. Either way, the ghost lost her best friend, and we get a taste of her lingering pain when she tells Arya, "I gorged on grief at Summerhall."
So there's yet more potential for the ghost impacting the main saga. She might have partly inspired Rhaegar's fixation with the prophecy that eventually led him to Lyanna Stark, causing a rift that saw the Targaryen dynasty overthrown, with the crown prince being slain by usurper Robert Baratheon. These dynamics form the central backstory to the main saga, and we've long held that the Rhaegar plus Lyanna equals Jon Snow theory lies at the heart of the Song of Ice and Fire that defines this story.
Speculation aside, it's clear that the ghost isn't some random minor character we should be paying no mind to. We might wonder then who she is and what her backstory is. Like Quaithe, this character screams mystery. It would be foolish not to explore her full story and background, or in the context of this episode, who she might secretly be. And so let's consider if the woods witch known as the Ghost of Highheart indeed has a hidden identity.
So, what do we know about her? She's very old, perhaps unnaturally so. She's 3 feet tall and a rare albino. She's related to the old gods and boasts prophetic abilities associated with green magic that are proven to turn out very accurate, as we see in her 2 scenes with the Brotherhood Without Banners. And finally, Jenny of Oldstones, who was very close to her, believed she was a child of the forest, though Maester Yandel disagrees. So, what do all these strange details add up to?
First, let's address the claim that the ghost is a child of the forest. When we meet the children, later in Bran's story in Bloodraven's cave north of the wall, they are described as being very small, so the ghost being 3 feet tall seems like a great match. Then she has the white skin and red eyes that resemble a weirwood tree, which is interesting given what we learn about red eyes via Bran chapters. Those you call the children of the forest have eyes as golden as the sun, but once in a great while one is born amongst them with eyes red as blood, or green as the moss on a tree in the heart of the forest. By these signs do the gods mark those they have chosen to receive the gift.
So, red eyes among the children of the forest could denote being chosen by the old gods, marked with green magic. Remember that Bloodraven's remaining eye is red, and he is known as the last green seer. This could be another connection between the ghost and the children.
Then there's the ghost age. She is clearly very old, struggling to walk with a cane, but there are hints she could be older than your typical human would live. She claims to have not been kissed for 1,000 years, and while this is no doubt an exaggeration, George is perhaps hinting at an unnaturally long lifespan for humans at least. In Bran's dance chapters, we learn that the children of the forest live to be hundreds of years old.
And with the ghost living a nomadic existence in the Riverlands, where she's noted to visit the decimated former Children of the Forest territory at Highheart, it seems a no-brainer that she's in some way related to the children. In fact, if we return to the passage about Highheart from the World Book, it seems like there might be a cheeky hint at this connection when it says, "The ghosts of the children still haunt the hill by night." However, a close inspection of her appearance alongside the Children of the Forest in Bloodraven's cave highlights key differences.
Yeah, the children we see are more animal-like than the ghost of Highheart. Bran notes their dappled skin, large cat-like eyes, and the fact that they have 4-fingered claw-like hands. Arya gets a good look at the ghost in the Storm chapters and notes nothing of the sort. Our conclusion is, then, that the Ghost of Highheart is a human child of the forest hybrid. The only answer to this that makes any sense as we see it is that she had one human parent and one child of the forest parent.
So we're suggesting that a human character mingled with a child of the forest and created the Ghost of Highheart. But we also hear your skepticism. Can humans and children of the forest really interbreed? Well, there are very strong hints in the World Book that this was happening in the Neck historically. Maester Yandel notes of the Crannogmen, who reside in the swamps of the Neck, that they are, quote, a small, sly people. Some say they are small in stature because they intermarried with the children of the forest.
And so the notion that humans and the children of the forest interbred historically makes a lot of sense. Maester Lewin tells Bran that the histories say that the Crannogmen grew close to the children of the forest in the days when the Greenseers tried to bring the Hammer of the Waters down upon the Neck. Maybe grew close is a euphemism here, and the close proximity of the two led to hybrid offspring.
This seems the most likely explanation for why there were green magics present in First Men blood. The children of the forest boasted wargs, green dreamers, and green seers perhaps because of magic in their blood. This magic could have made its way into human bloodstreams by interbreeding and then spread amongst the First Men, explaining why there are numerous wargs in the north and beyond the wall. The fact that the Stark kids are noted by George to all be wargs might be traced back to historic Stark marriages to Crannogmen or other northern clans that share this history.
And so, as strange as it might seem at first, the idea of the two species interbreeding does make a lot of sense. If we can accept that that's possible, and we feel certain it is, then it puts the existence of the Ghost of Highheart in a whole new light. If we accept she's a hybrid character, then we can begin to wonder who her parents might be.
And so the search is on for a human character who might have had a relationship with and reproduced with a child of the forest character, producing an albino, old gods prophetic hybrid character. And it really doesn't take too long to line up the prime suspects.
Yeah, given that there are so few Children of the Forest characters, the scope is very narrow. At the start of the main series, Maester Luwin at Winterfell believes that the Children of the Forest are extinct. To his knowledge, there are none in the north or anywhere else. Given that we learn the First Men and Andals invaded Westeros and drove the elder races farther and farther north, it might be true that there are none in Westeros.
But when we venture north of the wall with Jon Snow, we soon meet characters belonging to another elder race, the Giants. This is a major clue that the children of the forest are not extinct after all, and in Dance, we finally see them on page at Bloodraven's cave. There, we meet Bloodraven, who was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch until he went missing on a ranging. He ended up in this cave and has spent many years practicing the art of green seeing, tangled up in the roots of an old weirwood, unnaturally elongating his lifespan.
Bloodraven begins his tenure as Bran's mentor, and we learn more about the Children of the Forest, who call themselves those who sing the Song of Earth. Though the singers are small, in reality they are not like children at all. Bran meets a few of them, and the most prominent singer character is called Leaf, who lives in service to Bloodraven.
So, if the Ghost of Highheart is the hybrid child of a singer and a human character, with the dearth of singers in the story, we should perhaps consider Bloodraven and Leaf. As we said earlier, Bloodraven is a rare albino with white skin and hair and red eyes. George has said that Bloodraven has, quote, milk-white skin, and looking closely at the description of the Ghost of Highheart, it says, her flesh was the color of milk. So in both instances, these two characters have skin likened to milk.
Albinos are so rare in this story that the only two confirmed albino characters aside from the direwolf ghost are Bloodraven and the Ghost of Highheart. The fact that both are heavily related to the old gods is another great fit, with one being a 1,000,000-to-1 green seer and the other an amazingly accurate green dreamer. Altogether, there's definitely strong reasons to wonder if the ghost could be Bloodraven's offspring.
So let's consider Leaf. She's clearly spent a lot of time with Bloodraven in the cave, no doubt dating back to the time he arrived there. It's insinuated that the singers and Crannogmen grew close due to their close proximity and isolation in the Neck. Could a similar dynamic between these two have led to intimacy? Well, perhaps the big problem here is the timeline. Bloodraven went missing in 252 AC. The tragedy at Summerhall occurred in 259, 7 years later. If Bloodraven first met Leaf after arriving at the cave, there's no chance the ghost is at Summerhall as an adult. The Woods Witch, who's widely accepted to be the ghost, was a grown woman who had already developed a close friendship with Jenny of Oldstones and advised Jaehaerys about the prince that was promised.
So this seems to create a big problem for the notion that Bloodraven and Leaf could be the ghost of Highheart's parents. However, a close look at Brand 2 of A Dance with Dragons reveals an intriguing blink and you miss it detail. Leaf says, I was born in the time of the dragon, and for 200 years I walked the world of men to watch and listen and learn. I might be walking still, but my legs were sore and my heart was weary, so I turned my feet for home.
So, Leaf was born during the reign of Aegon the Conqueror, also known as the Dragon, and walked the world of men for 200 years, which opens up some really intriguing possibilities. In the context of today's discussion, it means that she might have met Bloodraven before he arrived at the cave. He first came to the wall in 233 AC, so it's possible that he and Leaf could have crossed paths before then while he was still spymaster in the south.
Now we're in deep speculative territory here, but it's not difficult to imagine how or why Bloodraven and Leaf might come to meet. She might have held special prophetic knowledge given to her by greenseers of her people that Bloodraven was a hugely important character for the endgame apocalyptic battle against the others. Perhaps she was given a mission to seek him out and educate him about greenseeing and his vital role in the future. And as someone already interested in magic, he might have listened. He might have already been aware of ancient prophecy.
In this way, the two of them could have bonded. They might have engaged in a romantic relationship, or perhaps Leaf might have insisted that they produce a child that she knew was essential to the endgame scenario, the future Ghost of Highheart. Either way, that child may have changed the course of history and had a major influence on the prince that was promised prophecy, since Aerys marrying Rhaella, or even Rhaegar and Lyanna's union, may have never happened without her input.
Yeah, we know that the ghost changed the fate of Westeros and ensured that the prince that was promised would be born of the Aerys Rhaella line. Her being the child of Bloodraven and Leaf would only add to her gravitas and mystique. That could explain the ghost's strange and unique appearance and a deep connection with the old gods and the children of the forest. As Bloodraven's child, she would have a narrative purpose of bridging the gap between Dunk and Egg in the main story.
And in case you're concerned about the timeline, Bloodraven left court for the Wall in 233 AC, not long after Aegon V ascended the throne. Lady Jenny and her friend the Woods Witch arrived on the scene in 239 AC. So, not only is Bloodraven not acknowledging his daughter not an impediment to this theory, the timeline could actually add more depth to the theory by introducing the possibility that Bloodraven engineered having someone at court who represented his interests in furthering the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. Altogether, the ghost is a minor character with major influence whose existence could also confirm aspects of George's world building, including the historic unions between the Crannogmen and the Singers. We call this theory the Ghost of Bloodleaf.
Now, we realize we've already suggested today that Bloodraven could be Melisandre's father. Perhaps you don't like that idea, but like this one, or vice versa. But as we see it, there's certainly an equal chance that both could be true. 3 albino characters with an aptitude in magic and prophecy, rooted in the backstory, but having an outsized impact on the main story. No wonder we're so anxious to know if Bloodraven had any daughters. And on the flip side, we do think that even if you disallow Bloodraven as the father, the ghost as Leaf's daughter by an as yet unidentified human works almost as well, though admittedly you lose the albino connection.
So there you have it. We hope you've enjoyed our 4 hidden identity crackpots featuring Lem Lemoncloak, Quaithe, Melisandre, and the Ghost of Highheart. Next up, we'll take a look at what other hidden identity reveals might be in store for us in the Winds of Winter and beyond.
Kings are a rare sight in the north. Robert snorted. More likely they were hiding under the snow. Snow, Ned!
At the start of this episode, we covered those hidden identities that have already been revealed as of Book 5. But as we await the next installment of the saga, we shouldn't forget the ones that could be revealed in the Winds of Winter. While we've covered the possibility of reveals for Lem Lemoncloak, Melisandre, Quaithe, and the Ghost of Highheart, there are potentially so many more in the pipeline. Some would be reveals to the reader, and others the reader is already privy to, but characters in universe are not.
So let's walk through the hidden identities that could be revealed in the upcoming book. To the far north, there's Cold Hands, the mysterious assistant to Bloodraven who helped Samwell Tarly get south and Bran Stark reach the cave. So little is known about this character that we don't even know his name. Samwell dubs him Cold Hands due to his, well, cold hands. And that coldness insinuates that Cold Hands is undead, though it's noted that his eyes are black rather than the bright blue of those whites controlled by the others.
So, Cold Hands seems like the only long dead white in the story who's not a thrall of the others. Instead, he seems to be Bloodraven's man. All we know is that he wears black Night's Watch garb and is said by Leaf to have been killed long ago. And so readers wonder, who is Cold Hands really? For a long time, fans theorized that he could be missing Ranger Benjen Stark until a draft copy of Storm revealed that George had flatly denied this theory to his editor, Anne Grohl, who, like us, wondered who Cold Hands is. Other fan speculation suggests that he could be anyone from The Last Hero to the Night's King, Sir Duncan the Tall, Waymar Royce, or one of Bloodraven's entourage of archers known as the Raven's Teeth. Time will tell if Cold Hands really is a pertinent character we know, or just some unknown member of the Watch.
Further south past the wall at Winterfell, Mance Rayder has infiltrated the castle with 6 free folk spearwives sent on a mission by Melisandre to free Arya Stark from Ramsay Snow's clutches, posing as a singer named Abel. He successfully broke Arya out of her captivity with Theon Reek Greyjoy, though the contents of the infamous pink letter might suggest he ended up getting caught by Ramsay before he could make his escape. Surely the Winds of Winter will deliver more on the fate of Mance Rayder and his hidden identity.
And in the same plotline, let's not forget about Arya here. This Arya is really Jane Poole, forced to masquerade as Arya in order to consolidate the North for the Boltons in a marriage pact. Ramsay Snow was well aware that he was not marrying the real Arya, but the question remains, who fell for the ruse, and what will it mean for the North politically? With more than a few hints at a coalition of northern resistance against the Boltons, the existence of fake Arya is an integral part of the story in the North. Keep in mind that after the fake Arya escaped Winterfell, she was taken in by Stannis' camp and then sent north to Castle Black. We look forward to seeing what impact this hidden identity has for the wider story.
Speaking of Arya, let's not forget her sister in the Vale. Though readers are privy to the fact that Littlefinger's bastard daughter Elaine Stone is really Sansa, most characters in story haven't cottoned on yet. How will a Sansa Stark reveal change the dynamics in the Vale, and what further tricks does Littlefinger have up his sleeve? One thing's for certain, this reveal will be a big deal in universe, creating narrative shockwaves likely to reach the North and the Riverlands.
And in the Riverlands, there are a couple more hidden identities. First, there's Catelyn Stark, who was brought back to life after the brutal Red Wedding as the vengeful Lady Stoneheart, also known as Mother Merciless. The reader sure knows who Lady Stoneheart is, as do the Brotherhood Without Banners, who are doing her bidding, yet there's going to be a nasty identity reveal in store for those in the Riverlands who have wronged her or her family. One day we might get to be a fly on the wall when Walder Frey meets the undead Catelyn Stark for the first time since the Red Wedding he orchestrated. Good luck with that, Walder.
And there's another potential hidden identity in the Riverlands at the Quiet Isle near the mouth of the Trident. There, Brienne sees an unusually large gravedigger with a large scarf across his face. He walks with a limp and gets on strangely well with Septon Meribald's dog. Could this mysterious man be someone we know?
Well, given the gravedigger's large size, fans can't help but wonder if this is Sandor Clegane. We last saw Sandor take the leg wound at the inn at the crossroads before being left behind by Arya Stark, so him nearly dying but being saved by the brothers of the Quiet Isle seems like a good fit. The elder brother at the Isle tells Brienne that the Hound died at the riverbank, but in keeping with George's theme of identity, perhaps it was only the Hound part of Sandor that died, suggesting a rebirth of sorts. As a neat little twist, there's a horse on the Quiet Isle, currently known as Driftwood, who's ultimately revealed to have been Sandor Clegane's warhorse, Stranger, our single example of an animal with a hidden identity.
So, to us, this theory is really a no-brainer, and we look forward to the gravedigger reveal posing the question, did a near-death experience really relieve Sandor of his anger, aggression, and thirst for vengeance against his vicious brother Gregor? If so, what is his future role in the story?
And speaking of Gregor, in King's Landing, he seems to have a hidden identity of his own. Perhaps the Dornish prince Oberyn Martell had the last word after Gregor crushed his skull in their fateful trial by combat. A brute of a man with no conscience, Gregor had been a great asset to the Lannisters over the years, yet the poison on Oberyn's spear might have finally done him in. But maybe his tenure didn't end with his death.
That's right. In Dance, the mad former maester Qyburn delivered a hulking new Kingsguard knight to Cersei Lannister, who carries her to the Red Keep after her walk of shame. The fandom consensus is that Qyburn has reanimated Gregor to serve Cersei in her time of need. Though there are few readers who deny this theory, in story many characters are still oblivious. So how are the Martells going to feel if and when they find out that Gregor still works for the Lannisters? With Nymeria and Tyene Sand headed to the capital to spy for Doran Martell, it seems likely that we'll get an answer in the Winds of Winter.
And speaking of the Sand Snakes, Sorella Sand seems to have a hidden identity at the Citadel in Old Town. In Feast, we learn of a character called Alares, which sharp-eyed readers have noticed is Sorella spelled backwards. With that insight, it seems obvious that Sorella and Alares are one and the same. This hidden identity serves an immediate purpose in-universe. The Citadel and its Order of Maesters is strictly for men only, so Sorella needed to change her gender to study there. But what does she want from the Citadel, and what will she learn there? There's a lot of mystery going on with this hidden identity.
One possibility in this plotline is that Alaraz will figure out another hidden identity. Leaving Harrenhal, Arya Stark witnessed Jaqen H'ghar change his face to that of a hook-nosed man. Someone who appears to be that same man presented himself as the alchemist in Pate's A Feast for Crows prologue chapter. At the end of that chapter, the alchemist killed Pate and then likely took his identity to infiltrate the Citadel. In fact, we see Pate in Marwyn's chambers when Samwell Tarly arrives in Old Town. Questions remain about what the Faceless Men want with the Citadel and what would happen if the fake Pate is ever exposed.
And across the narrow sea, we have hidden identities aplenty. Readers are particularly interested to know what will happen when Yolo finally reveals he's Tyrion Lannister. Yolo was nearly eaten by lions at Daznak's pit, where he was obliged as a slave to perform a routine with fellow dwarf Penny. While his identity has become secretly known to a select few in story, throughout his arc in Essos, Tyrion has been awaiting the moment that he meets Daenerys Targaryen.
Though Daenerys found herself lost in the Dothraki Sea at the end of Dance, there is no doubt she'll one day return to Slaver's Bay, probably with an enormous Dothraki horde at her back. It seems inevitable then that she'll meet Tyrion one day. This will be a massive moment for both major characters, and so readers wait with bated breath for the day Yolo becomes Tyrion.
Speaking of Tyrion and his journey through Essos, let's not forget that he spent a lot of time with Griff and company. This whole cast of characters and plotline is brimming with hidden identities. First, there's the septa called Lemore. Tyrion tries to unravel her real identity, noting that she bears the scars from childbirth at odds with her vows of chastity and has the mannerisms of a highborn lady. Some fans wonder if she could be a Shara Dane, though Tyrion never notes the septa as having those distinctive violet eyes. Our former guest Igraine suggests that she might be Wenda the White Fawn of the Kingswood Brotherhood fame, noting that she's about the right age and that there were members of the outlaw group from House Toyne who are linked to Golden Company sellswords in the employ of Griff.
Griff isn't Griff, though. He's really John Connington, close friend and big-time admirer of Rhaegar Targaryen. How he'd love to seat Rhaegar's son, known as Young Griff, on the Iron Throne and overthrow the Lannisters. How will Westeros react when they find out the exiled former Hand of the King is making inroads from Griffin's Roost?
Of course, Coddington believes young Griff is really Aegon Targaryen. However, many fans believe that Aegon isn't really Aegon after all, that instead he's a descendant of the Blackfyres, those legitimized Targaryen bastards that came so close to taking the Iron Throne in the backstory of Westeros. Believers in this theory point out the fact that the Golden Company is ready to die for Aegon, that same Golden Company who were founded by the Blackfyre diehard Bittersteel.
So with Connington and Aegon seeming to be oblivious to the possibility the young man is a Blackfyre, who is behind this plot? The theory purports that former Master of Whisperers Varys and his rich Pentoshi friend Illyrio Mopatis have hidden identities relating to the Blackfyres. Varys has already posed as Rugen the Jailer, so what's another layer of hidden identity to add to the pile? Altogether, the Blackfyre theory offers yet more depth to a cast of characters hiding their true selves.
And finally, we've saved the biggest potential reveal for last. Up at the wall, there's a lowly bastard named Jon Snow. Ostensibly, Ned Stark fathered him during Robert's Rebellion, though nobody, including Jon himself, is quite sure who his mother is.
The central fan theory here is called R plus L equals J and purports that Jon Snow isn't really a bastard after all. He is in fact none other than the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, a hidden prince in the story and Targaryen heir. We won't delve into the details of this theory here. We do have a whole R plus L equals J episode for that, but we will say once again that we think this is a nailed-on theory at the very heart of this saga.
Yeah, with the title of the story being A Song of Ice and Fire, we can't overstate how pertinent it might be that Jon is likely the walking embodiment of a union between the ice and fire houses of Starks and Targaryens. In fact, the only known offspring of such a union in the story. This is a hidden identity designed to flip the whole saga on its head and cause amazement among readers.
Sadly, George was not able to finish the books before the advent of the internet, where fans were able to publicly collate all the clues and spread the word about this theory. Nowadays, more readers are aware that Jon is likely Rhaegar and Lyanna's son than not. what should have been the most central, mind-blowing twist of Hidden Identity is now common knowledge.
With that said, there are still many facets of this reveal that have fans scratching their heads, none more so than the question of how this reveal could potentially affect the later plot. It's clear that George means for Jon's true heritage reveal to be a massive moment for readers, with so much effort having gone into laying the clues and building the backstory of Westeros around them.
And so we've wondered in previous episodes if Jon being a secret Targaryen will make him a late candidate for the prince that was promised. Remember, the ghost of Highheart predicted that the promised prince would be born of the Ares Rhaella line. If Jon is Rhaegar's son, he would be one of only 2 characters from that line.
Then there's the angle that he could be the Targaryen heir. With Daenerys Targaryen so intent on taking Westeros by storm and claiming the Iron Throne, how's she going to feel if she learns that there is a secret Targaryen still alive who notably would be ahead of her in the line of succession? With Dany already potentially fated to face young Griff/Aegon Targaryen on the battlefield, perhaps realizing that he is the fake Mummer's dragon, symbolically depicted in the House of the Undying prophetic vision sequence, what's she gonna think when another Targaryen pops up out of nowhere?
Yeah, how would Dany receive the news that Rhaegar's other son, who would be her nephew, is alive and well after living a life hidden as a bastard Stark? And how would Jon prove to her that he's the real deal? There's definitely the potential for some major friction here, though many fans predict that there could also be room for romance between the pair. Where that romance could lead is another question.
There were just so many wonderful narrative possibilities with Jon being a hidden Targaryen that in the context of this episode, it serves to underscore just how important hidden identities are to this saga. This reveal could echo across the whole story and stand it on its head, even though most readers are already aware of the basic theory.
But as big as this hidden identity could be for the wider story, we hope today we've proven just how relentless George has been in the repetition of the hidden identity trope. What strikes us is not just how important they are, but just how many there are. We've lost count of the many hidden identities we've walked through during the course of this episode. Just kidding, there are more than 26 characters associated with one or more hidden identities, with another half dozen or so we think could be revealed to have hidden identities. In fact, among the POV characters alone, we count 10 who have at some stage taken on different identities.
And so clearly, this is a device George truly loves, more than just a gimmick, but a cornerstone of his writing in A Song of Ice and Fire. And we hope we've shown today how deep this well goes, how he avoids making the repeated trick feel cheap, and how hidden identities can at once be a lot of fun for the reader and a serious literary device that explores one of George's favorite themes, the theme of identity. How many among us have ever wondered who we truly are?
We hope this journey has given you a lot of food for thought, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. We hope you'll let us know what hidden identity theories capture your imagination.
Thanks so much for joining us today. As usual, we'll end the episode by giving credit where credit is due. Thanks to George R.R. Martin for the mysteries that beget crackpots, and to Kevin MacLeod for allowing us to use his music in our production. And now it's time to thank our patrons from the Castle Steel level. If you enjoy the podcast, consider being a patron, and you could be hearing your name here too. Our most heartfelt thanks to Atori Loon, AJ, Aegon VI, Ali B, Sir Brennan of House Lawton, Carlos the Mesquite Maester, Casey, Cassandra, Lady Amalthea, Chris, Christian, Courtney, David, Darian, Dimitri B, Dennis, Lady Diana Dane, Emily of the Eyrie, Ezra, Septon Pat, Gerald Garcia, Sir Gladworth, Sir Gregor the Toasty, Lord of the Bread Fort, Honeybee, Something Like a Lawyer, Jim McGeehan, Winter's King, Red Jimba Rivers, John Aris, Rider of the Ice Dragon, Sonarion the White Storm, Jordan G, Judson, Katie, Tree Girl, Anne Hayden Jones and her husband Pip, Lauren, Lemba, Lomas Knight Rider, survivor of the Yeen sleepover, Mage Marmot, Monera Geek TV, Maria, Margareta, and our cohort of Matts. Matt A, Matt C, Matt F, Matt K, Matt L, Matt M, Matt R, and Matt S, as well as Beatrix Rainfall, Maester Mary, Molly, Nimble Nick One-Iric, Paul B, Paul H, PJ, Peter, King Ray, first of his name, Rickle Pickle, Sam, Sir Swift, the Peppered Knight from the House of Black and Grey, Sir Larsala of Bee Hill, Cern, the Rat Chef de Cuisine, the Peppered Knight, Terry, Steph Lioness, Vince, Quarren Halfhand, and Yvonne. As always, let us know if I've pronounced any of your names wrong, if you have a nickname you'd prefer to use, or if you feel